drugs that are in the early stages of research, they haven't even been fully tested in terms of safety, they haven't even been proven to work yet, should never be peddled out to our society. Because the fact is, we would never gamble the lives of so many people by using untested and under-researched drugs. 3 points of clash for the House today. First, are developing nations better off with early stage drugs? 2, will the quality of drugs improve with a decreased regulation? And 3, what do the outcomes look like for the general public? Now, on the first point, they widely asserted the idea that because developing nations don't have a lot of resources, that any drug is better than no drug, and therefore we should quickly push out these new underdeveloped drugs. Why is this wrong? First, we have to be able to recognize that these low socioeconomic and developing nations, they really don't have those sort of resources to be able to do any sort of critical research in terms of, is this drug actually safe? Like, is this drug going to give me long-term damages onto my body that I don't actually know about? This sort of asymmetric information is what makes the developing nations increasingly more vulnerable in these situations. I mean, let's just look at what the firm is itself. The firm's #1 goal is profit maximization. It's not about values or, sustainability. It's not about any of these things. It's about how can I make the biggest amount of money? And that means that they'll do anything to, decrease the regulations, to push out drugs faster, to not meet the regulations. And when you move it from 99% working to 90%, that 10% is so big. That 10% is going to critically affect people in developing nations, because at the point where these big pharmaceutical companies, they come into the developing nations who really don't understand if medicines from the Western nations actually work. They really don't understand the possible implications of taking, under-regulated drugs. If this is actually bad for them, is when they're coerced into using drugs that could give them significant long-term health negatives. What does I mean? If you just take a look at an example we've given you on Kenya's birth control, obviously they needed a solution really quickly. Big pharmaceutical companies were like, hey, we have this drug and it could possibly work, so we're just going to give it to you. They had no other option, so they took the fast option like the opposing team is characterized. And this sort of, I need this really quickly, is not the mentality people should be taking when they're considering what sorts of drugs to put in their body when they can significantly harm their bodies long term down the line. They thought this was just a quick and easy solution, but the fact is it has led to long-term health negatives for these people. Imagine if you're just wanting to take a cough drop and this cough drop ends up giving you, I don't know, cancer. It makes you have liver failure. These are the sorts of negative health implications that come with peddling out drugs that are under-regulated, that aren't fully tested yet. That's what you get on their side of the house. The low socioeconomic stakeholders and developing nations are significantly more vulnerable because, first of all, they don't understand what it means to have a good quality drug. Second, they're extremely desperate, so they're much more easily to be coerced by these big pharmaceutical companies who only have profit in mind. And third, because of this, they're much more likely to take these sorts of drugs. They're much more likely to take under-regulated and under-tested drugs, which are going to have long-term health negatives for the developing nations, which is just going to make it even harder for them to come out of that developing stage when so many people in that society are just critically hurt because they're taking drugs that they don't know the full implications of. Second of all, on the quality of the drugs themselves, why will the quality actually decrease? First, when you give someone a deadline, and it's then moved further away, their first instance isn't to think, I'm going to work immediately harder. It's my thought is, I'm not going to work as hard because the deadline's been pushed. This is the exact same thing with these restrictions. when the restrictions are eased, they're not more incentivized to go work much harder. They're more incentivized to now take it in a more relaxed stance. They know that they can meet these regulations in due time. They know they don't have to, quickly work hard against other competitors to meet that 95%, efficiency and capability, so they're not going to be incentivized to work harder. This means that drugs are going to come out either A, of a lower quality, or second, of the same quality, but it's going to take longer, and that means more people with these health issues aren't going to be able to get the drugs that are properly tested, properly researched, that they so need. The quality of drugs will just decrease at the point where you just have companies either rushing to make a drug that they can push out because they know that the restrictions are eased, or a company that isn't producing drugs efficiently because they know that the regulations have been now eased, and now that they don't have to work as hard, the environment is not as competitive. Big pharmaceutical companies lose this incentive, and it means that people with real health issues won't actually be able to get the drugs that they need. Now, on the third point, on the outcomes for the general public, again, their broad push here was that just people need something really quick. They kept talking about how vaccines, if it only takes like a few more months to get into that 5% more of testing, but this just isn't right. That 5 to 10% of testing and capability of working is so significant in this debate. The opposing team doesn't realize that that 10% could be saving so many lives. That 10% ensures that you're not going to get liver failure by taking a drug that's just supposed to solve your sore throat, that you're not going to get cancer because you just wanted, a Panadol to solve your headache. When little simple drugs are sold off that are untested, they could have so many negative health implications that consumers of in the general public don't understand. That is the point when they're so negatively affected that our whole society just breaks down. I mean, at the point where these restrictions are broken, where they're eased, is when, pharmaceutical companies can, keep pushing for the regulations to be decreased. Because at the point where that restriction isn't solid, doesn't have a good foundation, where they know it's wobbly, where they know they can keep, grinding away at it and pushing it down and down and down, is where we have drugs that aren't even, 50% tested. They don't even have a 50% chance of working. These are the sorts of drugs that are going to be pushed out onto our public, and obviously this is not going to be a good thing. A 50% work rate isn't going to be enough. At the point where we have people in our society using unregulated and untested drugs is a point where our society has so many negative health implications. The developing nations are going to be coerced into taking drugs that they don't need, that don't even work. The quality of the drugs themselves will just rapidly decrease if we decrease the amount of testing needed. And the general public's health is just going to decline steadily and rapidly.